My name is Nora Evans. I'm 28, and I thought I knew everything about the man I was going to marry. Stephen Garcia, 30, charming, confident, my fiancé of a year, had always seemed open, honest, until today. Until I discovered the secret he had been hiding from me for 8 months. It started like any normal afternoon. I had been scrolling through my phone after work, the soft hum of our apartment air conditioner filling the silence. Stephen had left for his spinning class, leaving me alone with a strange sense of unease I couldn't shake. Something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Then he called me earlier, joking about the wedding plans, and something in his tone, it didn't sit right. I replayed his words over and over, trying to rationalize the unease, but deep down I knew there was more, something he wasn't telling me. I remembered the conversation from a few weeks ago. He had dropped this bombshell casually, like it was no big deal. "Nora, I've been doing something on the side to help with our wedding costs. It's lucrative." I had laughed nervously, assuming he meant some kind of freelance IT consulting, maybe tutoring. But the truth hit me like a punch to the chest when he revealed the words, OnlyFans. 8 months of secret content. 8 months of images, videos, and online interactions while he smiled at me every morning. Every laugh, every shared coffee, every plan we made. He was living a parallel life online, and I didn't even know it. I remember sitting on the couch, my hands trembling, staring at the screen he had left open on his laptop. The bio, the photos, the subscriber count. Everything confirmed it. He had hidden it from me because, as he put it, "You're not good enough to say no." The words echoed in my head, a mixture of rage and disbelief washing over me. Not good enough? After years together, after planning a life, after promising each other honesty and respect, how could he dismiss me like this? For a long moment, I just stared. Not angry, not panicked, just shocked. And then slowly, clarity replaced the haze. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking, and began taking screenshots. Every detail, every bio, every subscriber comment. I had to have proof. Not just for myself, but for the people who would inevitably be dragged into this storm. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at Ron, Stephen father. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the send button. But I knew there was no turning back. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, about truth, about exposing a betrayal that had been festering for months. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Ron's voice came through, low, stunned, almost primal. "What the? Nora, is this real?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. 8 months. He lied to you, to me, to everyone. There was a long pause, the kind that fills rooms even when the other person isn't physically present. Then, barely above a growl, Ron said, "I'm coming over. Don't move." I had anticipated his anger, but not the sheer intensity of it. 20 minutes later, the screech of his truck announcing his arrival felt like an omen. I was alone in the apartment, surrounded by silent evidence of Stephen's duplicity. My chest tightened with every passing second, knowing that this confrontation would not just expose a secret, it would ignite a storm that no one could have predicted. When Ron stepped into the apartment, his face pale, his hands shaking, I felt a mixture of vindication and guilt. I hadn't set out to hurt anyone. I had simply insisted on honesty, and the consequences were cascading like a landslide. Stephen, oblivious to the storm about to hit, returned from his spinning class. Upbeat, lighthearted. That all ended the moment he saw Ron standing in the living room, phone in hand, evidence of months of deception flashing on the screen. His confusion, rapidly shifting to panic, was almost cinematic. What is this?" he stammered. His bravado, the one he had used to belittle me, to dismiss my boundaries, to insist that I could not object, it vanished. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, though I hated myself for it. This wasn't a game. This was the man I loved, unraveling in front of me, and I couldn't save him from the consequences he had ignored for so long. As Ron confronted him, voice shaking with anger and disbelief, I realized that this was more than just betrayal. It was the revelation of character, Stephen's sense of entitlement, his lack of respect, his inability to consider anyone's feelings but his own. And yet, in the midst of chaos, I felt a strange sense of power. I had taken control where he had refused to act responsibly. I had exposed truth where he had hidden lies. This was only the beginning. The lies, the deceit, the emotional manipulation, all of it would come crashing down, and I would be at the center, navigating the aftermath with clarity, with resolve, with a determination I hadn't known I possessed. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before: free. Ron's truck had barely disappeared down the street when Stephen finally realized the gravity of the situation. His usual confident swagger had vanished, replaced by a jittery, almost desperate energy. He looked at me, eyes wide, as if seeking an ally. But I wasn't that person anymore, not today. "Nora, what did you do?" he asked, voice trembling, half anger, half panic. "I told your father the truth," I said, keeping my tone calm, deliberate. Every word was measured, like a scalpel. All of it. 8 months of lying. 8 months of hiding an OnlyFans account while wearing the engagement ring I gave you. That's what I did. Stephen ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small apartment. You can't just... He's going to explode. He'll ruin everything." I let out a bitter laugh, sharp and low. "Everything? Stephen, everything has already been ruined. By you." The doorbell rang. I hadn't even heard them arrive. Ron's presence had been announced earlier by the screeching tires, but now the reality of the man standing on my doorstep, shoulder set like a battering ram, made the apartment feel impossibly small. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Patricia close behind, eyes narrowed, disbelief written in every line of her face. "Stephen," Ron said, his voice low, dangerous. "Care to explain this?" He held up the phone, screen glowing with screenshots, bio, subscriber counts, and proof of the secret life Stephen had led behind everyone's back. Stephen froze. "It's not what it looks like," he started, his voice wavering. "It's exactly what it looks like," Ron cut him off, his hand gripping the phone like a weapon. "Selling your body online, behind your fiancé's back, and calling it, what, empowering? Real work?" His gaze snapped to me. "Nora, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." I swallowed, my throat tight. I didn't want to involve anyone, but this isn't just about money, or a hobby, or whatever he wants to call it. This is about trust, honesty, respect, none of which he's shown me. Patricia stepped forward, her voice steadier but no less sharp. "Stephen, look at your fiancé. Look at her. 8 months of deception. 8 months of hiding a secret from someone who loves you. This is not empowerment. This is betrayal." Stephen opened his mouth again, fumbling. "It's just photos. It's anonymous. Anonymous?" Ron roared, a sound that made the apartment shake. "Do you think keeping it a secret matters? She had no idea, and you expect her to accept this as normal? 8 months of lies, Stephen. Do you understand what that means?" I felt a chill as his mother's piercing gaze met mine. Patricia's disappointment was tangible, almost physical. I had always feared her judgment, but now I understood the weight of her expectations, not just as Stephen's mother, but as a woman who valued integrity, honesty, and family. Stephen's hands shook. I wasn't cheating. I thought, it's just my body, my choice." "You chose to lie," I said, the words sharp, cutting through the tension. "You chose to hide your choices from me while pretending to plan a life together. And when I confronted you, you laughed." His eyes darted to me, defensive, guilt and arrogance colliding. I didn't mean it that way." "No," I interrupted, voice stronger than I expected. "You meant it exactly that way. You meant to assert control, to test me. For years, every compromise, every boundary I set, you pushed back. This was just the apex of it." Ron leaned forward, fury barely contained. "Do you even understand what you've done? Your actions have consequences. Nora had no part in this, yet she bears the emotional weight of your choices. She deserves better than this disrespect." Stephen sank into the couch, shoulders slumped. I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought she'd understand." "Understand?" Patricia's voice was quiet now, deadly in its calm. "Nora didn't ask for your secret. She asked for honesty. She asked for respect. You gave her nothing but lies and laughter. That is not understanding." I sat back, chest heaving. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw every painful emotion at him, but another part felt something else. Relief. For the first time, the truth was out, and I wasn't the one carrying the burden of secrecy. "I need to take a moment," Ron said, finally turning to me, His hand rested on my shoulder, steadying, reassuring. You did the right thing, Nora. I know this doesn't feel like it, but exposing the truth is the only way to prevent further damage. Patricia added, softer but firm. We raised him better than this. You didn't cause this, Nora. You only asked for the respect you deserved. Stephen looked between us, panic and defiance warring on his face. I realized then that the man I thought I knew, the man I had almost spent the rest of my life with, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who thought entitlement, secrecy, and arrogance were acceptable in a committed relationship. And yet, amidst the chaos, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in months: control, clarity, power. I could no longer be a victim of his deception. I had acted. I had spoken truth. I had forced accountability. The storm had only just begun, but I was ready to face it. The apartment felt smaller than ever. The air seemed thick, heavy with unsaid words and shattered trust. Stephen sat across from me on the couch, shoulders slumped, eyes flicking between my face and the evidence on my phone. I could see the panic, the desperation, the realization that the world he had meticulously controlled for months was crumbling around him. I can explain, he started, voice low, pleading. It's just, I didn't want you to freak out. I thought it would help with the wedding, with us. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Help with the wedding? You think hiding intimate content from your fiancé is helping? 8 months of deception. And when I confront you, you laugh in my face. You dismiss my boundaries, my feelings, my dignity. He flinched at the word dignity, but I wasn't finished. Do you even realize what you've done? This engagement, it's over. That ring, I held out my left hand, the engagement ring glinting under the apartment light, comes off today. His jaw tightened. Nora, don't, please. We can work through this. It's just a mistake, a misunderstanding. I shook my head, my voice steady despite the storm inside. A mistake doesn't last 8 months. A misunderstanding doesn't involve lying to the person you claim to love, all while profiting from your deception. I've spent years compromising, giving in, letting things slide, and I'm done. He reached for my hand. You're overreacting. It's just photos, Nora. I'm still the same person you fell in love with. I pulled my hand back, the ring catching the light one last time before I removed it and let it drop into my palm. The same person who thinks laughing at my boundaries is acceptable? The same person who hides secrets for months? No. That person is gone, and so is our engagement. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Stephen sank deeper into the couch, hands in his hair, struggling for words that wouldn't come. I felt a rush of something I hadn't anticipated. Grief, yes, for the relationship that could have been, but also relief, freedom. I had reclaimed control over a life that had been slowly overshadowed by his arrogance. I didn't think it would get this far, he muttered, voice barely audible. You didn't think it would get this far? I repeated, incredulous. Stephen, I've been thinking about this for months. Every time I compromised, every time I let your subtle manipulation slide, I knew something was off. I just didn't realize how deep your deception ran. He shook his head, desperation creeping into his expression. Nora, please, we can fix this. We can work through it. I can stop. You can stop what? Profiting off secrecy? Mocking my boundaries? Betraying my trust? I stood, heart pounding, voice rising with the force of years of suppressed frustration. No, Stephen, you don't get a redo. You don't get a do-over. This is who you are, and I'm done letting it define me. His shoulders slumped further, the weight of his own actions pressing down. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the laughter, the dismissal, the subtle erosion of my self-respect over months and years. No, there would be no pity today, only clarity, only the truth. I walked toward the door, taking a final glance at the apartment that had once been ours. The walls seemed smaller, the light harsher, the air heavier. But beyond that door, beyond the remnants of a relationship built on deceit, there was freedom. A chance to rebuild, to reclaim, to define myself without compromise or manipulation. Stephen didn't follow. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. In that moment, I realized he never would. His charm, his confidence, his carefully curated persona, none of it could withstand the weight of truth and accountability. And that truth, for once, was mine. I opened the door, letting the light from the hallway spill in, illuminating the path forward. It was terrifying. Yes. Lonely? Yes. But it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I felt the stirrings of something I hadn't dared to hope for: self-respect, clarity, and control over my own life. The ring, now in my hand, felt heavy, not with loss, but with the gravity of a choice made for myself. I would not compromise, not for money, not for love, not for anyone who refused to honor boundaries and honesty. This was the moment everything shifted. The engagement was over, the illusions were gone, and while the storm that Stephen had unleashed was only beginning, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would not be caught in its wake. The days after the engagement collapsed felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Every notification on my phone, every message, every comment online became a reminder of Stephen's deception. The storm we had unleashed wasn't contained within our apartment. It had spilled outward into social media, friends' group chats, and even casual conversations with acquaintances. Stephen, in his usual mix of arrogance and panic, tried to spin the narrative. Nora overreacted. She's controlling. She's judgmental. She ruined everything over nothing, he typed in our mutual friends group chat. His words, meant to rally support, only fueled the backlash. Screenshots of his OnlyFans account circulated, revealing 8 months of secret content. Suddenly, the truth he had tried to bury was everywhere. Friends who had once laughed at our inside jokes now sent quiet, awkward messages. Some asked if I was okay. Others quietly blocked Stephen, unable to reconcile his charm with his deceit. The fallout was swift, brutal, and utterly satisfying, not for revenge, but for accountability. One of Stephen's former classmates even sent me a screenshot. A subscriber from the platform had posted a link on a niche forum, piecing together his identity from subtle clues in his posts. The web of lies that Stephen had spun so carefully had unraveled in public view. Through it all, I maintained my composure. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for support. I simply documented everything. Every message, every accusation, every attempt at manipulation. My evidence was meticulous. Every screenshot, every time-stamped conversation was stored, a shield against the chaos he had created. The hardest part wasn't the social media backlash. It was seeing how Stephen's arrogance had infected even those closest to him. Friends who had known about the OnlyFans account but stayed silent were quietly called out. The people who had turned a blind eye were now facing consequences too. It wasn't cruel. It was inevitable. And then came the most unexpected part. His ex-girlfriend, Becca, reached out. At first, I thought it was to gloat or manipulate, but instead, she warned me. "He's the same with everyone," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "He hides things, manipulates, pushes boundaries. You just happened to catch him at the right time." Her words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they confirmed what I had suspected all along. Stephen wasn't a victim of circumstance. He was a pattern of behavior, and I had almost been trapped in it. Meanwhile, his parents, Ron and Patricia, were relentless in their support. Ron texted me multiple times a day, checking on my well-being, reminding me that the responsibility for this disaster lay squarely on Stephen's shoulders. Patricia, ever meticulous, even helped me strategize the best way to manage the social fallout, keeping my dignity intact while Stephen floundered. I remember one evening, scrolling through my phone, seeing the chaos he had created online. Half his friends didn't know about the OnlyFans account. The other half were complicit by silence. The comments in the group chat exploded with outrage. "You lied to her. This is disgusting. How could you manipulate someone you claim to love?" Each message was a dagger, but one I had no part in forging. Stephen, in attempts to justify himself, only made things worse. "It's just my body. It's my choice," he said in a live stream, trying to salvage his image. But credibility crumbled, with every comment exposing the timeline of his deception, the laughter, the disrespect. The audience he had tried to manipulate turned on him, and for once, there was no one to shield him from the consequences. I felt a strange sense of calm watching it unfold. Not satisfaction. This wasn't about schadenfreude, but validation. The truth had power, and I had wielded it responsibly. For once, someone's lies were fully exposed, and I had stayed true to myself in the process. And yet, I knew the storm wasn't over. Social chaos had external consequences: legal threats, roommate disputes, and public drama were all on the horizon. Stephen's obsession with control and image meant he wouldn't quietly fade into obscurity. But I was ready. My documentation was precise, my boundaries firm, and my resolve unshakable. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The engagement was over, the lies were exposed, and even as the chaos swirled around me, I knew that my life, my choices, and my dignity were finally mine to reclaim. The aftermath was a strange mix of quiet and chaos. The engagement was gone. The apartment that had once been ours emptied of Stephen's presence, and the social fallout had run its course. For the first time in months, I could think without the weight of deceit pressing down on me. I moved into a smaller studio closer to work, a space that felt like mine for the first time. No hidden secrets in closets, no mysterious charges for content creation, no arguments over boundaries. Just me, my thoughts, and a future I could finally shape without compromise. The air felt lighter, almost tangible, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the years of tension and deceit that Stephen had brought into my life. Breaking the lease on our old apartment was complicated, but ultimately, it became another lesson in self-advocacy. Stephen's attempts to force me into deadlines or manipulate the process fell flat. The management was understanding, especially once I presented the evidence of the broken engagement and his claims of financial independence through his OnlyFans income. I chose to handle the situation with precision. Photographs of every belonging, professional packing, scheduled delivery to his cousin's address. Every step was meticulous, controlled, everything Stephen had never been. Even his attempts to drag the drama into public spaces, my workplace, mutual friends, and social media were neutralized. Screenshots of his comments, his lies, and the absurdity of his defense circulated quietly, ensuring that the truth remained visible while I stayed above the chaos. People saw the pattern, the manipulation, and the arrogance. I was no longer the target. I was the witness, the one who had refused to be complicit. Through it all, I learned something profound. Self-respect was not a passive state. It was active, deliberate, and sometimes painful. I had set boundaries that I had once ignored, confronted lies that I had once excused, and reclaimed control over my life in ways that felt almost revolutionary. Even Stephen's attempts to manipulate friends and family backfired spectacularly. His claims of being misunderstood, his assertions that I had overreacted, fell flat when juxtaposed with the evidence. People who had once been loyal to him were forced to reckon with the truth, and many quietly distanced themselves from him. The network he had relied on for validation unraveled, leaving him isolated. In quieter moments, I reflected on the subtle signs I had missed. The laughter when I tried to assert myself, the dismissals of my concerns, the insistence that boundaries were optional. All of it painted a picture of someone who didn't respect me, who had never truly considered my feelings. And yet, I had almost stayed, almost compromised, almost allowed myself to be trapped in a life defined by someone else's ego. Now, months later, I could see how far I had come. My bank accounts were healthier, my mind clearer, and my self-worth intact. I began dating again, cautiously, honestly, sharing the barest outlines of my past without descending into drama. People respected the clarity I had gained. I no longer needed to hide, excuse, or explain my boundaries. The messages from Stephen dwindled over time, occasional attempts to provoke, plead, or manipulate. I ignored them all. The ones from mutual friends who had been caught in the middle gradually ceased as well once the truth was clear. Even his attempts to reconstruct his image online crumbled. The credibility he had once relied on was gone. And then came the rare moments of quiet reflection, where I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Betrayal, anger, grief, but also clarity, strength, and empowerment. I had survived the storm intact without losing my sense of self. I had acted with courage when the truth demanded it, and the consequences, though intense, proved the value of standing firm. The final closure came quietly. A message from his father, Ron, simple and heartfelt. You did the right thing. Never doubt your strength. We still consider you family. His words, devoid of judgment or blame, grounded me. I realized that the right actions, even when painful, could preserve integrity, honor, and dignity. I stood in my studio one evening, looking at the city skyline through the window, the lights shimmering like stars caught in glass. For the first time in months, I felt the peace that comes from reclaiming control. No more walking on eggshells, no more tolerating disrespect, no more compromise of self-worth for the sake of appearances or money. Stephen had tried to define me through his deception. He had tried to manipulate, belittle, and control. But in the end, it was I who had the final say. I had chosen myself. And in that choice, I found freedom.